It all begins right here in this alleyway. In all likelihood, at least. Right here, the body of what very well could be the first victim of the cryptic and anonymous serial killer who called himself the Zodiac was discovered. This killer would go on from here and commit an untold number of homicides for the next 12 years, at which point he ceased all communication and went dark for all of time. There is still, to this day, no solid explanation as to who or what this person was. All we can know about the Zodiac must be taken from what little story we can gather from the horrific crimes they committed. And this, potentially, likely, is the site of Zodiac's first crime. Our story begins here. This was the headquarters of the Oceanside Police Department, and it was here, on the night of April 9th of 1962, that a beguiling phone call came in. The anonymous caller rang and stated, "I am going to pull something here in Oceanside, and you will never be able to figure it out." Then the caller hung up. To our knowledge, nothing was done immediately. Then, one day after the strange phone call, a 29-year-old taxi driver by the name of Ray Davis, who was by all accounts a decent enough man, sat in his cab waiting for his next fare in the middle of downtown Oceanside on a late Tuesday night. I could not find the actual location exactly, but it was somewhere around here. As Ray sat and soaked in what would end up being the last moments of his life, a passenger approached and got in. At 11:10 p.m., Ray then radioed back to the taxi dispatch headquarters and told them he was taking a fare down to South Oceanside. After Ray carried this passenger into the cold and dark night, he would not respond to or make any further dispatches. He would not be seen alive again. What we do know about what happens next is almost nothing. Ray Davis then proceeded to make the 2.2-mile drive from downtown Oceanside to this alleyway. He put the car in park and turned off his meter directly in front of 1926 South Pacific Street. It happened to be the home of the previous mayor of Oceanside. It was a prestigious and very, very fancy neighborhood by the name of St. Malo. By this point, nothing seemed too amiss. Ray turned off the meter, and his passenger was sitting directly behind him. The passenger then fired a .22 caliber shot through the driver's seat and into Ray's back. Then the passenger fires one final shot into Ray's head, just below his left ear. At this point, the passenger exits the back seat and drags Ray Davis's body from the cab and leaves it there on the ground directly in front of the house of the previous mayor. This also just happens to be directly across the street from the current mayor of Oceanside at the time. The location and the neighborhood suggest that this body was dumped here for maximum publicity. The passenger then gets into the driver's seat of the cab and speeds away into the night. He heads northward on a path probably like this one. On these streets, the passenger, driving a cab with a bullet hole shot through its windshield, went undetected until he dumped the cab in an alleyway behind 411 South Pacific Street, only a half a mile from the original starting point. Also, only about a 3-minute walk from the Oceanside train and bus stop. Then there is silence. A patrolman then stumbled onto the body of Ray Davis at around 1:15 a.m., completely perplexed. The cab wouldn't be found until 6:30 a.m. The police discovered nothing was stolen from either Ray or the cab. Ray even still had a decent amount of cash in his wallet and his shirt pocket. Nothing was stolen. The crime itself seemed to indeed be completely senseless and random. Fingerprints were collected from the cab, but it being a cab and all, the fingerprints were not exactly reliable. Then there is more silence. Evidence collected, then stored away for eternity. 22 caliber bullets, Ray's belongings, and files. Then, the following day, the Oceanside police receive another anonymous phone call. It seems to be from the passenger. They say, "Do you remember me calling you the other day and saying I was going to pull a real baffling crime? I killed the cab driver, and I'm going to get me a bus driver next." It's important to mention here that the original threatening call had not been released to the press, so this caller must have indeed been the same as the original. After this, the story explodes. It's in all newspapers in California, in fact. Every big paper covers it. The Oceanside Police Department then places officers and literal Marines on all city buses for the following week. All the big papers in California at the time continued to run stories on it. Then, after making all that noise, the killer completely vanished for the next 8 years.
Words are in my head, but I can't enunciate them clearly. Headphones on your head.
So here's a brief rundown of the most notable and famous Zodiac Killer murders. Back during the killing of Ray Davis in 1962, the killer went silent, as far as we know. There are a bunch of other possible victims, but who really knows? So fast forward to 1968, when we get a fully formed serial killer who goes on a year-long rampage in San Francisco's Bay Area in a highly publicized manner. The list of murders are as follows. Number 1, David Faraday, age 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, age 16. Shot and killed late at night on December 20th at a secluded Lover's Lane. Number 2, Michael Mageau, age 19, and Darlene Farron, 22, shot and killed late at night on July 4th, 1969, again at a Lover's Lane. The boy, Mike Mageau, actually survived the initial attack, but he died at the hospital. Number 3, Brian Hartnell, age 20, and Cecilia Ann Shepard, age 22. Oh my God, there's a fish. Both were, differently this time, picnicking at a romantic spot by a lake before being held at gunpoint, then tied up, then stabbed repeatedly by a hunting knife. Also, notably, Brian Hartnell actually survived. He couldn't do much in the way of identifying the killer, as they were dressed in a creepy Zodiac executioner outfit. Here's what it looked like. 4. Then, notably, most notably even, is the murder of Paul Stine, age 29. He was a taxi driver who picked up a fare in the bustling downtown San Francisco. He took the fare to the upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights before shooting the taxi driver, as with Ray Davis before him, in the head just below the left ear. Before the killer ran off into the night, he tore off pieces of Paul Stine's blood-stained shirt. Pause. Hello? Left. Then walk down the path, you'll see a long wooden bridge, then you'll spot us. Bye. And also this time, took his wallet and car keys. Assuming this is the same killer as Ray Davis, the Zodiac Killer, he'd learned by this point how to make a statement. The Zodiac Killer would then mail pieces of the bloodstained shirt, the contents of Paul Stine's wallet, and the keys to several newspapers, along with his now famous ciphers and further unknown details of the previous murders, in order to prove it was really him. He also used the same exact gun to murder Paul Stine, 22 cal gun, and long rifle ammunition. Then, at the end of his letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, as with the murder of Ray Davis, the Zodiac Killer threatens to rampage a bus, a school bus this time. He writes, and I quote, "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." First kill a taxi driver, then threatened a bus just as before. But with their newfound media training, the killer ups the ante and threatens children. But as with the threat to the bus all the years before, it was not followed through with, and the killer then again went completely silent, and for the most part, they disappeared into the night, yet again, for all of time. Here's the thing. I only live like 5 minutes away from this Oceanside crime scene. To think that some young dude started this horrible cycle of inhuman violence right here in my neck of the woods is strange. This person loved bragging about their crimes. They loved making phone calls to victims' parents. They loved sending threatening letters to the police that would allude to even more unsolved murders committed by them that they would never figure out. And they've sent in strange ciphers, and they did all this weird stuff. Ray Davis and the Zodiac Killer. It seems quite likely to me that they are connected. A very strange and grim piece of history in this peaceful little village by the sea in Oceanside, California. This is the lonely grave of Ray Davis, resting here next to his brother Jack and his mother Virginia, his only family. No one else living to remember him. His tragic death perhaps forever forgotten. At the tender young age of 29 years old, Ray was murdered. And it could very well be that he was one of, if not the first victims, of the cryptic and deranged Zodiac Killer.
Thrown like a star in my vast sleep, I opened my eyes to take a peek, to find that I was by the sea.